I think it's the time to get started. Welcome to Thermodynamics 2 2026 webinar talk series. And our presenter today is Shripad Mahulikar, Alexander von Humboldt Fellow from University of the Basque Country, Spain. And the title of the talk gonna be Radiation Entropy Generated by Leaf and the Negentropy Buildup of the Plant is Dissipative Structure. And this is a part of the Thermodynamics 2 2022 series, and we are interested in bridging the natural and social sciences. Our next conference will be on August 5 to 7, mostly online. Those interested to participate in person, you are welcome to join us as an organizer. And it's a part of the conference theme. We are working on the next issue of the Thermodynamics 2, and it'll be Thermodynamics 2 towards unified natural and social science. And we would like to invite you to submit an abstract so that we can include you in the proposal. That way, you'll be receiving an invitation from Royal Society to submit article to that issue. And with much further ado, I would like to hand this floor to Shripad. And Shripad, would like to hear your great work on the topic. And now floor is yours. Shripad.
Okay, so thank you very much. So I'll start sharing the screen now. So is my screen visible?
Yes, I can see that paper.
Okay. So I'll be giving my presentation today on this particular very fresh work. And let me now begin with this presentation. So let me try to make, yeah, okay. I think this is full screen and everybody can see the full screen. Okay. Radiation entropy generation by leaf and negentropy buildup of plant as dissipative structure. And this is based on the very fresh work now, just out from the review process. Let me begin with this presentation straight away. And let us start with the prelude. So I would like to make it very clear that my presentation is going to be, I will stick only to the basics, because actually I want to make things as simple as possible. And there are actually very great thermodynamics experts here. And actually, I take this opportunity to learn from the thermodynamic experts. So if I say something which is fundamentally wrong in the basics, please don't hesitate to correct me. Right. So with this short request, I start with the presentation. So to begin with the prelude, now I'll be talking about this reaction and trying to address where is the actual green energy in this reaction. This is what I will try to address. So before we go into the details are actually a non-equilibrium thermodynamic holistic analysis, which would mean I'm not looking at the finer details of the process of, let us say, biology. I'm looking at this problem of radiation entropy generation in a holistic non-equilibrium thermodynamic framework. So that is actually the scope of my presentation. So in fact, some of the finer details of biology of photosynthesis, I'll be very clear. I do not know myself. So what I'll try to present is a holistic thermodynamic view. And to begin with, so let us talk a bit about photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is light to chemical energy conversion. So let me try to be a little bit more specific. Sunlight, let us say, to chemical energy conversion. Now, this conversion annually results in worldwide storage of 3 into 10 raised to power 21 joules of energy in biomass, in let us say glucose. Okay. Now, to put this into different perspectives, this process of photosynthesis annually fixes 100 to 170 billion tons of carbon into organic compounds biomass. Now, to put it in another perspective, the energy stored exceeds 10 times the total annual free energy consumption of the human civilization. Now, this is actually the importance of this very simple looking chemical reaction, simple for all the plants, but to the best of my knowledge, no human being has achieved it, perhaps not even in the laboratory scale. Now, this apparently simple chemical reaction for the green plants is actually the conversion of light to biomass. The stored chemical energy supports nearly all life on Earth. It provides the food and it provides the oxygen as well. So, to be very honest, for some reason, if this reaction does not take place, then actually life on Earth, perhaps at least on terrestrial Earth, may not exist. So, this is actually the importance of this reaction. And well, the reality is this reaction has not been fully understood. And this is just one small step towards understanding this reaction of this work. Okay. So let me go to the next slide. Now, in the next slide, I will talk a little bit on the background. So as I mentioned, I'll be restricting my presentation only to a holistic insight, that is the scope. And I would like to now read out the quote of Boltzmann. So Boltzmann said, the struggle for existence of living beings is not for energy, because energy is plenty as heat, but unfortunately, untransformably in everybody, energy is plenty as heat. The struggle for existence, it is the struggle against entropy that becomes available through flow of energy from hot sun to cold earth. And to make fullest use of this energy, plants spread out immeasurable areas of their leaves and harness the sun's energy by process as yet unexplored, before it sinks down to temperature level of earth to drive chemical synthesis, of which one has no inkling as yet in our laboratories. This is a verbatim quote by Boltzmann, and it is available in this particular reference. So this is what Boltzmann said sometime maybe in 1886, I guess. And let us take a look at some of the relatively recent work. So let us go back to sometime in the 1950s. Deussens, he said that photosynthesis could be viewed as a heat engine. And the efficiency of energy conversion, he said, is subject to upper limit expressed by the Carnot cycle. So this is what Deussens said sometime in 1958. And Jennings and others in 2005, that is just about 20 years back, they concluded that second law is violated in photosynthesis. So this is a verbatim quote from this work, that considerations demonstrate that second law is violated by core particles of plant photosynthesis. So this is what was said 20 years back, but just the next year, in 2006, Laverne in the same journal said thermodynamic insight remains valid and photosynthesis must necessarily satisfy the second law. Second law cannot be violated in photosynthesis. And what he clarified is that the fight against entropy, what Boltzmann said in 1886, the fight against entropy is actually the fight for free energy. This is what Laverne in 2006 clarified, that photosynthesis must necessarily satisfy the second law. Now, let me come briefly to the thermodynamics of dissipative structures. Now, the concept of dissipative structure, which was, let me say, introduced by Prigogine. So we have mass energy interactions of a dissipative structure with its surroundings. And relative to the surroundings, the dissipative structure is infinitesimally small. So we have energy and matter coming in, and it is absolutely necessary that energy and matter has to be released in order to satisfy the second law in the surroundings. So if we were to, let us say, apply, let us say, the first law of the conservation of energy, this is the accumulation of energy in the dissipative structure in minus released, accumulation of mass in minus release. And correspondingly, we have the growth efficiency, that is 1 minus release divided by in. This is for energy denoted as E and matter denoted as M. 1 minus release divided by N. So this growth efficiency of energy, which later on will be shown is actually the photosynthetic efficiency, is the fraction of radiation energy input that is used by the dissipative structure for growth. So the dissipative structure is characterized by, let us say, a mass, content, energy content, and we have a negentropy, a buildup of the dissipative structure. So this is the schematic. Now, before we go into the details means actually applying the second law, because first law is straightforward, mass energy is conserved. Now let us introduce entropy. Now entropy is actually the mass energy content multiplied by the entropy density. Now everybody knows from the first law or conservation that in the universe, mass energy content remains fixed. So actually, if the second law says that the entropy increases, what the second law says, because this is fixed, the second law says that the entropy density of the universe increases, or the entropy density of an isolated system increases. Now this entropy density is defined separately for mass and energy. For mass, it is entropy per unit mass, and it has the units joule per kg Kelvin. And for energy, it is entropy of the energy per unit energy, and it has the units per Kelvin. There is a small tricky point rather I wish to mention, that entropy of matter, the entropy density of matter, which is its specific entropy, it increases with increasing temperature, but the entropy density of energy, actually it reduces with increasing temperature of the emission. So this is just one point to be noted. Now once we bring in the second law, that the entropy in the surroundings has to increase, then we will soon come up with a relation that the growth efficiency is not just less than 1, because less than 1 is told by the first law, but it is less than a maximum. That maximum is less than 1. This maximum actually comes from the second law. This is for energy and this is for matter. For simplicity, for applicable to plant, these energy matter interconversions, like what happens, for example, in a black hole, is not considered. So for growth, it is between 0 and a maximum, and for decay, this growth efficiency becomes negative. So this is an introduction to thermodynamics of dissipative structure, and just a quick introduction bringing in the role of entropy. Now we need to bring in second law compliance of the dissipative structure in its surroundings. Now, here what do we say? That this dissipative structure is actually relatively infinitesimal relative to its surroundings. So no matter what the dissipative structure does, even if it grows, so it will grow if there is a net positive mass energy accumulation, but it always has to give out something to the surrounding, so that in the net, the entropy of the surroundings must necessarily increase regardless of the growth. Because one thing is very clear, the entropy of finite mass can always be increased by simply increasing the mass energy content. Because entropy is an extensive property, entropy density is an intensive property. So the entropy generated in the surroundings is energy release minus energy in, and the same is true with mass. So it is written in terms of energy, and the small s is the entropy density of energy released minus energy in, and the same is done for mass. So the entropy generated in the surroundings is, so this what is taken in, we call it negentropy depth, taken in from the surroundings. So this particular term has a tendency to reduce the entropy of the surroundings, but surroundings are infinite relative to dissipative structure. So the negentropy depth taken in has to be paid back to the surroundings. And this particular difference, negentropy depth paid out to the surroundings, must always exceed the negentropy depth taken in from the surroundings. At the most, they can be equal, but this difference is always, in general, always a positive number. So this difference now is the excess negentropy depth payment. So excess negentropy depth payment is always greater than or equal to 0. Now we will restrict our focus mainly to radiation, because very soon from numbers I will show that the amount of entropy generated in the surroundings because of mass release is not much. So nevertheless, for the sake of completeness, I have shown both the terms. So the amount of radiation entropy generation is released minus release energy times the entropy density minus N. The same is true with matter. And then we come with a ratio of entropy density of energy released divided by the entropy density of energy taken in. Now, this particular term is a major indicator of the processing level of the inflows by the self-organizing dissipative structure. Now, if it is a self-organizing dissipative structure, the ratio of released entropy density is much higher than the ratio. So, if it is the entropy density of release is much higher than the entropy density of N. So, this is true for energy. This is also true for mass. And what the second law says, that because this has to be always greater than or equal to 0, the minimum amount of energy that has to be released, that is corresponding this term to be equal to 0, is amount of energy in divided by this pi EDS, that is the measure of processing. So this is the minimum amount of energy that has to be released to satisfy the second law in the surroundings. It is less than the amount of energy released, and this is less than the amount of energy in. So that accumulation can take place. The same is true with mass. So based on this, we get a maximum growth efficiency, that is 1 minus 1 divided by this processing level, entropy density released by N. And this later on will be shown to be actually be the photosynthetic efficiency. Now we have this difference. The small s is the entropy density of energy released minus entropy density of energy in. This difference is actually the processing level of the dissipative structure of energy. Now it can be very easily shown by using these relations. It is actually having two terms. This first term is this radiation entropy generation divided by this E dot in divided by 1 minus eta growth, that is the growth efficiency. And the second term is the entropy density of energy in times growth efficiency divided by 1 minus growth efficiency. Now, because it's a self-organized dissipative structure, this particular difference is much greater than 0. Now, this very basic relation, which has been derived from the previous relations, actually what it tells that for this particular term, that is the one shown in green color here, more growth of self-organized dissipative structure is when the growth efficiency is high. But what is more important is that the low entropy density energy in should be integrated with the dissipative structure so that it remains more ordered relative to its surroundings. And the second term is for given processing level, that is fixed left-hand side, growth of self-organized dissipative structure is by reducing this term, the radiation entropy generated, subject to this radiation entropy generation should be greater than or equal to 0. So if the processing level is fixed, how is growth achieved? This first term here is reduced by reducing the excess negentropy depth paid to the surroundings. So that's how we achieve growth. Now, this particular term can be reduced subject to this radiation entropy generation being greater than or equal to 0. So this is the first point to be noted, which is obtained from the previous relations. The amount of processing level of energy, and the same can be told with matter, gives rise to two terms: radiation entropy generation in the surroundings plus the growth of the dissipative structure. So this is a general introduction to the dissipative structure, and plant will be very shortly shown to be a dissipative structure. So plant is a dissipative structure because it generates net radiation entropy in the surroundings by processing photosynthetically active radiation. Photosynthetically active radiation is in the range 0.4 to 0.7 micron. Now, this energy, let us say, comes from the sun. If the sun's surface temperature is approximately 5,700 Kelvin, then the corresponding peak wavelength is at 0.5 micron in the visible in the green color. Now, the plant is represented as a dissipative structure. It has biomass, that is glucose. Now, this biomass actually comes because of the difference in the energy that is coming in. The energy that is coming in the photosynthetically active radiation, this is taken in the wavelength band 0.4 to 0.7 micron. And what it gives out is the emission at the least temperature. This emission at the least temperature is 1 minus the photosynthetic efficiency in the photosynthetically active radiation times the energy in. Now, with the difference that this energy that is emitted is distributed as gray body radiation at the least temperature, where the least temperature is actually much lower. As a result of which, the entropy density of energy released is much higher than the entropy density of energy that is taken in. So now we have a plant which is schematically shown exchanging energy. It also exchanges matter. That is, it takes in water, carbon dioxide, it gives out oxygen, and it stores biomass in the form of glucose. And here we have the chemical equation, that is carbon dioxide plus water, giving biomass plus oxygen, where in terms of matter, this equation is perfectly balanced. But in terms of energy, it appears that it is not balanced because the amount of energy taken in exceeds the amount of energy emitted at the least temperature. So where does this difference go? This difference is what is termed as the amount of energy absorbed for growth, is actually in the covalent bonds of the biomass glucose. So this term, this equation, in equal to absorbed plus emitted, this is actually the first law or conservation of energy. But there is an interesting point from the second law. The second law says, what the second law says, that the energy that comes in, it comes in at the sun's, what we show the spectral temperature of the sun. Now, the spectral temperature of the sun will be shown to be the reciprocal of the entropy density at the inlet. Now, the energy that comes in has a very high quality entropic content because its entropy energy ratio is very low because of the high spectral temperature of the sun. And this energy that is emitted is at least temperature, where the least temperature is actually low. And that is the reason why the entropy content is actually of a much lower quality. That is, the entropy density of release is much higher than that of the inlet. And these difference in the temperatures, high temperature of the energy in and very low temperature of the energy release, is actually a requirement which comes from second law compliance, so that ordering takes place by storing the difference of energy in the covalent bonds of the biomass. Now, if this first law compliance appears to be very easy, just the energy terms have to be exactly equal. The challenge is now in getting the second law compliance in photosynthesis. Now, from the previous slide, the growth efficiency is actually the photosynthetic efficiency in par, that is energy absorbed by the plant for its growth divided by the amount of energy taken in, where this amount of energy emitted, that is 1 minus the photosynthetic efficiency times the amount of energy taken in par, that is by the Stefan-Boltzmann law, area of the leaf times the emissivity of the leaf times the sigma times the fourth power of the leaf's temperature in Kelvin. And the same point holds that we have now a maximum photosynthetic efficiency, which is less than 1. It is 1 minus 1 divided by the processing level of the leaf, where the processing level of energy by the leaf is entropy density of energy released divided by the entropy density of energy in. And the difference between these two entropy densities now has two terms. The first term is the radiation entropy generation in the surroundings. And the second term is the amount corresponding to the growth. Now, if the left-hand side is fixed and the left-hand side is much greater than 0, then growth is achieved by reducing the entropy generation in the surroundings, subject to that it should be at least positive. So that's how we achieve growth, by reducing the first term on the right-hand side. Now, what we have done is, this particular term we have converted into a dimensionless radiation entropy generation. That is the amount of radiation entropy generation per unit amount of entropy absorbed for growth. That is the low entropy density energy in times the energy absorbed for growth. And it can be very easily shown that it works out to be this relation, pi e leaf minus 1 times 1 divided by the photosynthetic efficiency. This is the term. And this particular term should always be greater than or equal to 0 to satisfy second law in the surroundings. So this dimensionless ratio is the net radiation entropy generated in the surroundings per unit radiation entropy absorbed for plant growth. Now, from this relation, it can be easily shown that the photosynthetic efficiency in par is given by this term, the general term. This is general expression, 1 minus 1 divided by pi leaf and so on and so forth. And this particular term is always less than the maximum photosynthetic efficiency, where the maximum photosynthetic efficiency is always less than 1. And this is obtained by putting this pi S rad gen equal to 0. This pi S rad gen, if you put it equal to 0, you will get the relation 1 minus 1 divided by a pi e leaf. Now, in this particular slide, we plot the dimensionless radiation entropy generated by the plant leaf on the y-axis. On the x-axis, we have the photosynthetic efficiency. And what is shown over here is the range from 0.5 to 1. And this particular graph is shown for different values of processing level, starting from 18 to 30. Now, I will clarify the points that now this particular graph, the x-axis, let us say, that is pi S rad gen equal to 0, is this particular dotted line, this horizontal dotted line. So the feasible region from second law compliance is only above this horizontal dotted line, corresponding to pi S rad gen equal to 0. Now, this particular intercept on the x-axis is actually the maximum photosynthetic efficiency. And if we stretch it to the left side, then we actually, if we try to go towards photosynthetic efficiency tending to 0, this particular ratio tends to infinity. So the upper limit to the plant growth, that is 0 net radiation entropy generation in the surroundings, is the intercept on the x-axis, that is the photosynthetic efficiency axis. That is when this term pi S rad gen minimum is 0, and then we get the maximum photosynthetic efficiency. So this maximum photosynthetic efficiency would mean that the plant has to emit, but what it emits is the minimum, that is in divided by pi leaf, and then it absorbs the maximum 1 minus 1 divided by pi leaf times the amount in. And the maximum net radiation entropy generation in the surroundings, that is no plant growth, is when the photosynthetic efficiency is 0, is when this particular term pi S rad gen tends to infinity. And this is when the amount of energy emitted is the same as amount of energy in. And then we have the amount of energy absorbed is 0. So to further clarify this particular graph, I have actually tried to show in this particular block diagram. So on the left-hand side, I'm trying to show that actually what happens when the photosynthetic efficiency, if we try to increase, and then if we try to increase the photosynthetic efficiency, it is actually by reducing the amount of radiation entropy generation in the surroundings. So when the photosynthetic efficiency is 0, then we have this pi Srn tending to infinity, no plant growth. And the other extreme is when the growth is the maximum, photosynthetic efficiency is maximum. There is no radiation, there is no net radiation entropy generated. And this corresponds to maximum plant growth. And then just as a hypothetical case, if this particular pi Srn becomes less than 0, it doesn't mean that the second law is violated. But then what it means is that the photosynthetic efficiency, because the photosynthetic efficiency is negative, if you substitute in that relation, the second law compliance is still there, but the second law compliance is without the existence of the leaves. That is, the leaves will start decaying when the photosynthetic efficiency becomes negative, and then this pi Srn takes a negative value, and this will keep on reducing. So this is actually the illustration how we use this dimensionless radiation entropy generation in the surrounding to explain how growth is possible in a plant by always satisfying the second law in the surroundings. Now, one thing is very clear, when we talk about negentropy, we must talk about entropy density only, because entropy is an extensive property and entropy can always be increased by increasing the mass energy content. So in my previous work, actually I have redefined the idea of negentropy introduced long time back by Schrödinger. So negentropy, now what is to be noted here is that when we talk about a plant, the plant is existing as matter. So the negentropy of plant has to be defined in terms of entropy density of mass, which is the specific entropy of mass, which has the units joule per kg Kelvin. But plant, which is existing as matter, it is actually generating radiation entropy in the surroundings by exchanging energy and also exchanging matter. So we need to have two terms in the negentropy of the plant as matter, that is the term corresponding to radiation exchange and the term corresponding to matter exchange. Now the term corresponding to energy exchange, radiation exchange, we actually need to invoke the entropy density of energy, which has the units per Kelvin, and this particular difference, actually the entropy density of energy that is trapped in the dissipative structure minus the entropy energy release, has to be multiplied by c squared, where c is the speed of light. So this term corresponds to the negentropy buildup due to radiation exchange, and this second term corresponding to the negentropy buildup due to the matter exchange. Now I'll quickly show that actually if a particular matter as dissipative structure, if it is able to change the entropy density of radiation, then this first term actually is much higher than the second term, and actually the second term can actually be ignored actually. So this is actually the specialty of the plants, that actually they can build the negentropy simply by the first term. Whereas, for example, most of the other animals, including, let us say, most of the other animals, they may not be able to generate the radiation entropy in the surroundings the way plants do. They actually try to generate entropy in the surroundings through matter exchange. So this is actually a specialty of the plants, that this first term more than overwhelms the second term. And it can be shown that if it is self-organized, then whatever is the entropy density of the dissipative structure is the same as what is the entropy of density of energy coming in, which is of a very high quality, that is low entropy density. So the negentropy buildup of the plant due to radiation exchange is actually minus c squared times the entropy density of energy released minus entropy density of energy in. And then just to make it very convenient, because the c squared is a very large number, so we actually divide the negentropy buildup. This is small f actually, small f, that is, it is the specific entropy in joule per kg Kelvin divided by c squared. It has the two terms. The first term is radiation entropy generation in the surroundings, and the second term is the amount of entropy that is absorbed for growth, that is the entropy density of energy coming in, times the photosynthetic efficiency in power. So the negentropy buildup of the plant due to radiation exchange is the sum of two terms. The first term is the mandatory compliance of second law. It is the net radiation entropy generated by the plant leaf. And the second term is optional actually from point of view of non-equilibrium thermodynamics. It is optional plant growth through photochemical reaction by integrating low entropy density power, that is photosynthetically active radiation. So negentropy buildup has two terms, a mandatory term and an optional term. Now we try to actually calculate these terms, what is the amount of entropy density in and what is the amount of entropy density release. Now we have a very classic relation, the amount of entropy density coming in. Now, while the relation given in this reference is not exactly the same, but actually I have confirmed that this derivation is correct. And this capital lambda sun is actually a dimensional constant in terms of the Planck's constant, speed of light, and the Boltzmann constant times the temperature of the sun in Kelvin. Now this entropy density of energy coming in is actually what we define as the reciprocal of the spectral temperature of the sun. The spectral temperature of the sun is a function of the wavelength in the PAR, photosynthetically active radiation. Now we have the following graphs here. That the first graph here is the spectral temperature of the sun in PAR, that is 0.4 to 0.7 micron. So as can be seen that as the wavelength increases, the spectral temperature drops, the spectral temperature in Kelvin drops. That is the same as saying that as the wavelength increases, the entropy density of radiation increases, the quality reduces. Now, and the right graph here is actually the entropy density of the energy released as gray body radiation. And this has the units per Kelvin. And it is plotted with respect to the least temperature. What is shown is the possible range what we have on our planet. Something like on our planet, we can have something like minus 45 typically. And at the most to let us say plus 45 or at the most plus 50. And what is shown is that the entropy density of energy released is actually, it reduces with the least temperature. So if the least temperature is low, then the entropy density is actually quite high. Now, it can be easily shown that this left graph, the reciprocal, is actually much lower than the right graph. And then what we do is we take the difference between these two, and then we get the negentropy buildup due to the radiation exchange divided by C squared. And this is actually having the units per Kelvin. And this is what is shown, the negentropy buildup actually it is reducing with the least temperature. If the least temperature is low, then we have higher negentropy buildup. Of course, this when we multiply by C squared, we actually get the negentropy buildup of the plant in joule per kg Kelvin. Now, while here I am actually just giving some numbers, entropy density of matter actually. Now, for example, we take liquid water in its specific entropy, it has this value, carbon dioxide, oxygen, glucose, these are the typical values. Now, whatever the changes that we take place, even if let us say the liquid becomes saturated, if it becomes saturated, let us say at the same temperature, at a different pressure, its specific entropy is higher. Or if let us say for the same pressure, if the temperature increases of liquid water, it becomes 100 degrees centigrade, again its specific entropy increases. But these changes in the entropy density of matter are much lower than the amount of negentropy buildup because of the processing of sunlight, which we get from this term. That is the negentropy buildup due to radiation. And just for the sake of completion, I have a small table here to demonstrate the highest and lowest thermodynamic performance of the leaf in PAR in the feasible leaf temperature range. So we have the performance parameter. This is the ratio processing ability, entropy density released by in. This is the negentropy buildup, and this is the maximum photosynthetic efficiency. We have two limits, that is plus 55 degrees centigrade and 0.7 micron, that is the highest wavelength, will give the lowest performance. And then minus 45 degrees centigrade and wavelength of 0.4 micron, this will give the highest performance. and these are the differences in the performance. In the processing ability is the highest. We have actually an increase in by 58%. Then the negentropy buildup increased by 46%, and the maximum photosynthetic efficiency increased by about 2.12%. Now here we study, now from this analysis it is clear that the most fundamental parameter is the processing level of the plant, that is this pi E leaf, that is the entropy density of release at the leaf temperature divided by the entropy density of par. Now it works out to be 4/3 spectral temperature of the sun divided by the leaf's temperature. Of course, both have to be in Kelvin. And what we have seen in this feasible range, that is -45 to +50, +55, and the wavelength range 0.4 corresponding to violet color and 0.7 corresponding to the red color. Actually, the typical value is somewhere around 20. And what the graph shows that if the wavelength is low, that is corresponding to the violet color, the processing level is actually high, followed by the blue color, followed by the green color, followed by the red color. And the x-axis is the leaf's temperature, that if the leaf's temperature is low, the processing level is high at lower leaf temperature. And the sensitivity to the leaf's temperature is much higher than the sensitivity to the wavelength within par. And this particular graph, we show the photosynthetic efficiency maximum as a function of the processing level pi E leaf. Now, this is actually the relation, the simple relation which we get 1 - 1 divided by pi. But what is more important, that the pi E leaf range in this is actually from 18.4 to about 29.12. That is what we see. This is the highest and this is the lowest. So this is, in this range we have actually the corresponding maximum photosynthetic efficiency range. Now, the maximum photosynthetic efficiency is given by this relation. Now, it reduces to 1 - 3/4 times leaf temperature, which is like the sink temperature divided by the spectral temperature of the sun. Now, if you take a look at this relation, 1 - 3/4 leaf temperature divided by the spectral temperature of the sun, it actually resembles very closely to the maximum Carnot cycle efficiency, that is the reversible Carnot cycle efficiency, 1 - sink divided by source. These two relations are very similar, and this actually rings the bell as to why several other researchers in the past have tried to say that the photosynthesis can be understood by a Carnot cycle model. Is actually because the maximum photosynthetic efficiency now shown in this word to be exactly obtained as 1 - 3/4 times the leaf temperature divided by the spectral temperature of the sun. Now, for both the cases, for maximum photosynthetic efficiency and the maximum cycle efficiency of heat engine, which is a reversible Carnot cycle, for both the cases, no net entropy is generated in the surroundings. And this is actually the reason why several researchers in the past have tried to say that the Carnot cycle model can give an understanding of the photosynthesis process. So these are the results, the analysis. Now I come to a quick summary of the scientific claims, which I have summarized in just the 2 slides. So the first summary is the plant functions as a self-organized dissipative structure. The reason, the leaf generates net radiation entropy in the surroundings for existence of plant with possible growth. Radiation entropy production in the surroundings by the leaf is mandatory second law compliance for optional photochemical reaction for formation of biomass to take place. Radiation entropy production is simple for any green plant, but not realized artificially due to difficulty in high processing level of par, that is radiation energy. Entropy density of par processed and then emitted by plant leaf, that is the amount entropy density released, is much higher than that absorbed, and the ratio is somewhere around 20. Now, this processing level pi E leaf much greater than 1 is entropic measure of processing level of par by the leaf. This particular term pi leaf determines margin for plant growth. Now this photosynthetic efficiency, it determines, so this pi leaf determines the maximum photosynthetic efficiency, which is positive for plant growth. This pi leaf is stronger function of the leaf temperature. The pi leaf is higher at lower leaf temperature. It is a stronger function relative to the wavelength in par process, though the pi leaf is higher at lower wavelengths. Now we have shown that this dimensionless radiation entropy generation we have introduced. So when this dimensionless radiation entropy generation is zero, plant growth is maximum. That is, the photosynthetic efficiency is maximum given by this relation. In that case, the amount emitted by the leaf is the leaf given by N divided by pi leaf. And when this dimensionless radiation entropy generation tends to infinity, there is no plant growth. That is, photosynthetic efficiency is zero. So whatever is emitted is whatever is the energy taken in. Now I come to the last slide. So I conclude by saying that the plants can build their negentropy by processing radiation and matter. Now changes in energy released and energy in are weighted by speed of light squared. Therefore, a small rise in this entropy density of release and small drop in entropy density of energy in can significantly increase the negentropy buildup of the plant. This negentropy buildup due to radiation exchange, it increases at is higher at lower leaf temperature and it is higher at lower wavelength in par process. Now, part of the negentropy buildup due to radiation exchange can be the source of free energy of plant for growth as biomass accumulation. Remaining part of the negentropy buildup due to radiation is dissipated in the surroundings as excess payment of negentropy debt, which is the mandatory second law of compliance for existence of plant as self-organized dissipative structure. The maximum photosynthetic efficiency is obtained in terms of the leaf's temperature and spectral temperature of the sun, where the spectral temperature of the sun is the reciprocal of the entropy density energy in of the sunlight in, and the expression for the maximum photosynthetic efficiency correlates with the expression for the maximum heat engine cycle efficiency, which is for a reversible Carnot engine, and for both the cases, maximum photosynthetic efficiency and maximum heat engine cycle efficiency, no net radiation, no net entropy is generated in the surroundings. Now, actually, in the future scope, what I'm planning, though actually I don't have any experience so far, this model can possibly be explained to explain the formation of tholins, because formation of tholins is linked to using sunlight, but because sunlight is required actually, let us say, to break the bonds of carbon dioxide water. But after breaking the bonds have to be formed again. So to break the bonds, energy is taken in, and when the bonds are formed, energy is released. And what is important to note is energy released has to be at a lower temperature from point of view of second law compliance. And this is what actually happens when tholins are, I will say perhaps, because I have not yet put my hands on tholins, because there is a saying that on Earth, tholins actually do not exist. And the argument given is because of the oxygen. But there is perhaps some missing link, because tholins are perhaps not present on Venus also. Tholins are perhaps not present on Mars also. Because perhaps even the temperature on the Mars is actually quite high for tholins to be formed. Tholins are seen only orbit of Jupiter and beyond. So actually, in the future, whenever I get an opportunity, I would like to see the possible extension to formation of tholins, which are actually complex organic compounds with perhaps too many complex bonds which are formed, which actually require release. When the bonds are formed, they need energy release at very low ambient temperatures, which perhaps are available only the orbit of Jupiter and beyond. Because to my knowledge, tholins are seen only in Europa, in the orbit of Saturn, in Titan, in Pluto and Charon. But to my knowledge, tholins are not produced in Mars. My knowledge may be, I'm not sure. Okay, but I'm trying to extend this to study tholins. So right, this is my work, the fresh work. This is my contact. So my research is co-funded by the European Union's program. So I acknowledge that. So this is my presentation, and I'll be more than glad to take on question. Anything you see is you'd like to clarify, feel free.
Thank you, Shripad. That's a great presentation. And now probably let's open this for conversation. And anyone have curiosity, question for Shripad, please unmute yourself and ask directly. Gerald, please go ahead.
Hi, the one thing I did not hear a definition of, and I think that it's key, is how you define growth. Because my general sense of this is that you've outlined extraordinarily well the ability for the specific negative entropy to increase within a plant. But this seems to me to be not directly related to the general understanding of what growth is, which is, in the case of a leaf, either expanding it or making it bigger, or taking on more mass, or generating new leaves, etc. So can you explain exactly what you mean by growth here?
Actually, what is meant by growth, actually, there are two parts. The first is based on first law compliance, and the second is based on second law compliance. So as far as the first law compliance is actually very straightforward. It is actually the amount of energy that is absorbed for growth divided by the amount of energy that is taken in. And then the second law compliance says that growth has to be a maximum. Not only that, based on the second law, first we need this high processing level. That is the difference between the entropy density release minus N. And then we have two terms here. The first term is the contribution of this processing to radiation entropy generation in the surroundings. And the second term is actually the corresponding to the growth. And this is where the second law comes in, because here it tells that growth is not just this eta, that is the photosynthetic efficiency being positive, but this positive photosynthetic efficiency is multiplied by the entropy density of energy at the inlet, which is actually very high quality and low entropy density. So this actually is growth corresponding to plant or any self-organized dissipative structure. It should be able to integrate the mass energy with the low entropy densities, and the high entropy densities are given to the surroundings. So this is how we achieve growth in self-organized.
Can I ask a follow-up question? So this means, I think, that the structure that you're talking about doesn't really need to expand or grow. It just needs to increase its negative entropy density to comply with both of these things that you just outlined. Is that right?
So the entropy density, firstly, we have the difference entropy density released, entropy density in, where released is much higher than in. Now, this particular difference is actually what is responsible for payment of excess negentropy depth to the surroundings plus optional growth. So optional growth would mean that if it is self-organized, it should be able to integrate the low entropy density of the energy at the in along with the energy content. And that is what actually happens, that this trapped energy of the sun is in the glucose, in the bonds of glucose. So the low entropy density, that is the high entropy quality of sunlight energy, is trapped in the bonds of glucose, and then it is made available as free energy of the plant, let us say for growth. Growth means, for example, doing work against gravity as an example, when let us say its height increases, and the low quality entropy, that is high entropy density, is released to the surroundings in order to satisfy the second law in the surroundings.
So last question here. I mean, what would, in a hypothetical system that could increase its specific negative entropy infinitely, then you wouldn't need to have any kind of expansion in the sense of growth that we generally think of when we talk about plants growing. All you need to do is sort of increase the negative entropy density in whatever it is that you had to start with, and it would satisfy this also. Is that right?
So the negentropy buildup comes because of this difference, the amount of entropy density released minus amount of entropy density in. And to define negentropy, we need to stick to entropy density and not entropy. So negentropy buildup is because of this difference, and this difference is actually this term over here is achieved by the high processing level. The high processing level is the processing of the sunlight in the case of plant. So we get the energy release at the least temperature is having a much higher entropy density than the sunlight that is taken in. This is how we achieve negentropy buildup in terms of energy exchange.
I have one question, Sripad. Like, how this relationship or your interpretation of growth translates to the, let's say, biological cell?
So actually to the biological cell, so in terms of growth, because I have not worked on cells in particular, but I have actually another parallel work which is currently being is under review. So, but that again is not specifically on cells. But if we say that cell is also a dissipative structure, then this particular general analysis which is shown, that is in terms of the first and second law compliance, and if cell were to be a dissipative structure, then exactly the same analysis should fit for a cell also. Because in my other work, actually, what I'm trying to show is that this is a general representation of any dissipative structure. And here, of course, we don't consider the relativistic effect. So the energy and matter interactions we consider separately.
Mhm. I see you have used that E equals to mc squared to interpret mass-related energy density, entropy density, and the energy-related entropy density together and try to come up with a more comprehensive analysis. I think this is extendable to the biological cell in some way. That's that's why I asked that question, Sripad. Thank you.
Yes, I believe that if if a cell is able to generate radiation entropy also in the by processing the radiation energy in, then yes, this general definition with the two terms, matter exchange and energy exchange, should be valid for cell also.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so this actually does come, yeah, it does come from E equal to mc squared, but then it is it comes because of converting joule per kg Kelvin into per Kelvin. We have that C squared factor. And actually actually just the C squared factor makes a big difference.
Yes.
It makes such a big difference that the second term becomes negligible.
In actual photosynthesis, is there some mass to energy conversion?
So actually, I'm not looking at it in a relativistic sense, because such type of conversions, for example, do take place in black hole as a dissipative structure. So in the case of photosynthesis, to the best of my knowledge, the energy and matter are handled separately, because this equation, this chemical reaction is perfectly balanced in terms of matter, and it is also perfectly balanced separately. So it is also separately balanced in terms of energy, and the difference between in and release is trapped in the bonds of biomass. So because mass conservation and energy conservation are two separate equations, we need not combine them in the case of plant. But this actually may not be the case in the for black hole as a dissipative structure. We need to combine them.
So
Gerald,
I have
please.
another question. I mean, this happens in chloroplasts in plants. And so these kinds of reactions are not, sort of whole cell reactions. They're in, sort of spaces that are developed in order to be specific to allowing this kind of conversion to occur. And this is the reason that I was asking the question about growth before, because I mean, you're generating here a chemical energy storage unit in terms of the sugar that you're making. And this can then be, of course, used to drive the development of ATP, for instance, to drive other sorts of cellular mechanisms that do relate to growth and expansion and those sorts of things. But I think that the idea that you have here is really more specific to the photosynthetic process that occurs in chloroplasts more than it is the whole cellular sort of energetic situation that leads to plant expansion and growth. Am I wrong about that?
Well, actually, this particular work, firstly, it is restricted to this particular chemical reaction only. And to understand the source of this trapped biomes from first and second law. In fact, the specific detail, the botany side of it, actually, I'm not aware. I'll be more than glad to discuss that. That is how to extend this to different cases. So as of now, I'm just trying to understand this very simple chemical reaction using first and second law compliance. So this is actually the scope of my current work. I do agree that we need to look into extending it to several other more different cases also.
And Professor Mahulikar, I have a question.
Yeah.
And first of all, very nice presentation. Congratulations. The one is that how can we explain this phenomena in terms of Gibbs free energy?
So the Gibbs free energy, that is the amount of mechanical work that is available. So for example, the amount of work that is required to do the work that is to be required, for example, against gravity, actually comes from this particular term over here. That is this particular term, that is the growth term, and that too at low entropy density. Is what is responsible for the free energy of the plant. So this term, the second term here, correlates with the free energy, and the first term actually is the dissipation term. It is actually instantly released to the surroundings to satisfy second law, and the second term correlates with the free energy stored in glucose, which is available, which can be made available in the form of free energy for plant growth, for example, to do work against gravity when it increases the height.
Okay, thanks. The other question I had was in the last term that you mentioned, when you were comparing with the Carnot law, and that is you had a term 3/4. Yeah. So does it mean that of course, it means that it's less than the Carnot efficiency by 3/4. Is that the case?
Well, firstly, this definition of, firstly, it is a constant. In this case, the constant is 3/4. In the Carnot cycle, that constant is 1. Now, so long as it is constant, the point that both these correlate in the form, that is, they reduce with increasing sink temperature and increase with increasing source temperature. This particular point is valid in spite of this factor not being equal to 1. This actually comes straight away from the derivation. So after the derivation, this factor actually was preserved as it is. And this constant being 3/4, it does not change the other conclusion that for both these maximum efficiency, there is no net entropy generation in the surroundings.
Okay, thank you.
4/3 actually comes because the entropy energy of radiation distributed as gray body is 4/3 times the leaf temperature, that is the sink temperature in Kelvin. That is how that 4/3 factor comes.
Okay.
Or rather 3/4 factor when you take the reciprocal here.
Could you please repeat that, the last conclusion when you said that the entropy is not being, when the efficiency is maximum, then the entropy generated is zero?
The net entropy is generated as zero. That is, whatever is taken, entropy taken in from the surroundings is the entropy given out to the surroundings. So the net entropy is generated is zero for both the cases. In the case of reversible Carnot cycle, as well as in the case of the maximum photosynthetic efficiency.
Thanks.
Yuzen, do you have any question?
Yeah. Just to clarify, that is negentropy depth paid out is exactly equal to negentropy depth taken in from the surroundings. So then we get the excess payment is zero, so no net radiation entropy generated, both in the case of maximum photosynthetic efficiency and maximum heat engine cycle efficiency.
One follow-up question, Shripad. What kind of experimental observation this analysis leads to? Suppose we have to, like from this insight, how we can improve our experimental process to analyze this photosynthesis process?
So actually, I have not looked at it from an experimental point of view because the main reason is because firstly, in the theoretical development itself, there were certain unaddressed points from the particularly by invoking the second law. So I have not actually thought about the experimental part, but maybe in case if such activity is planned, I'll be happy to look into it. So at the moment, I don't have a clear answer to the experimental side.
Is there any question from floor? Shripad has shared his paper with me, and anybody interested, I can send that to you. Yeah, Gerald. If there are no further questions, I would like to thank the speaker. I really feel like this will have very good insight to the analysis of a biological cell. That's where Idiradu and I'm interested. And thank you for this great lecture. And I look forward to make more connection and foster this international collaboration as well as scientific exchange. Thank you, Shripad, and all
Thanks
participants.
For the opportunity. Okay,
Thank
bye
you,
everybody,
Gerald.
and thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Well, my main project is still to get systems like physics, economics, and social sciences into one system. But since life also is a system, it should also fit in there. And this is now my latest part, and I'm not finished with this yet. But the idea is that life is similar to work. It creates order.
And
Parallel.
I'm very glad to see Georgie here. Georgie, welcome.
Hi, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you all. Nice to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I agree. Yeah, physics should be, maybe we'll see in the talk, made compatible with life in some way, because there is no reason to stop working in living systems. So we just haven't figured that out yet.